Hello and welcome to episode 18 of what I'm calling a NOTCAST. Again, just talking about stuff. It's the 17th of November, no, 16th of November 2020, Monday. And whilst I've given you some kind of guides and talk through various albums and box sets and bits and bobs like that, what I thought might be useful actually is a tour of the 20 most important records or the 20 best albums in my life. And I don't know how long this is going to take. It might take days to go through it. It probably won't take 40 minutes, which means this will probably be a two-parter, maybe a three-parter. Then again, I did the Pink Floyd one, and I thought, no, that might take a while, and it turned out to be something like 6 hours of me talking about Pink Floyd. And not one person has yet filed a complaint about it breaching the Geneva Convention for cruel and unusual punishment. So there's hope for us yet. What I've tried to do with these 20 records is to talk through which ones are important, why they're important to me, and to try and get a good cross spread, because at my age, I'm in my 40s, I still love music as much as I ever did. It's still as important to me as it ever was, and I'm still absolutely fascinated with new music, either made by old bands or by new bands, and I think it's really important not to lose touch of that. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I only listen to the band from when I was younger because it reminds me of being young, and I still feel like I'm young in my head, and I still feel that passion for finding new and unusual things. At any given moment, on any given day, I could find a song that would change how I see the world completely, and that's happened a couple of times in the past few years, in a way that's really kind of exciting. And there's a risk as you get older, you become bland, or you become boring, or you go, well, I've seen everything, I've heard everything. There's nothing new to be seen or to be heard. That's the start of the end. The question is, do you become old because you stop dreaming, or do you stop dreaming because you become old? I'm certainly never going to stop dreaming. I'm never going to stop having that enthusiasm and optimism. I think that the best song in the world could very well have yet to be written. The best film ever made, the best book ever written, has yet to happen. And the fact that I've got to live through so much of modern history, and to be able to experience some really fantastic works of art as they've been happening, in my memory, being able to go and see the bands on the exact specific tour for a record that I think is life changing is fantastic. I wouldn't want to be one of these people that only listens to bands that split in 1969 and thinks that rock started and ended with Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, and Jimi Hendrix. As far as I'm concerned, there are amazing things yet to happen in the world of music. So as you'll see, it's not just old fogey music here. It's not just old bands. Some records are very old, but not all of them. So it's been a very long day, by the way, and it's quite late in the day. Number 20. I've chosen 20 records, by the way. It's an arbitrary number. I could have chosen 400, and for every record that I have chosen, there's at least 3 other albums by those acts that are almost as good. Number 20 is Pretty Hate Machine by Nine Inch Nails. Now this record, and I'm not going to fib about it, had an enormous effect upon me when I was 16. When I was 16, as I'll probably mentioned before, this is the original, I think 1989 Island Records release, which I specifically ordered from a shop in the Boring, which has now been demolished. I first got a copy. Since this record came out, by the way, in October 1989, this is an 80s album. I don't feel like it's an 80s album. To me, this record feels very much like middle to late 1990. And I don't think this came out in the UK properly until 1991. I got sent a tape by a friend in the days when you would trade tapes across the world, and I got sent a tape of this on a 45-minute cassette, which means that I missed the last minute and a half of Ring Finger on the album, and I played that tape to death. I listened to it and I couldn't believe how good this record was. I think sonically it was very much a record of its time. and I saw the band live on this tour, and I was just blown away by how incredible that tour was. So this album here, Pretty Hate Machine, the Nine Inch Nails debut record. This is I think the more recent repressing there. Not the 2010 version, which was remastered by Trent Reznor, but this is a modern day repressing of the 1989 version of the album. At the time I heard this, I first heard this, and I was a single man, stroke boy, probably about the age of 16. And at the age of 16, I was just full of hormones and emotions. I felt everything very, 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 very intently indeed, and in some ways I still do. And the only thing that's really changed are my surrounding circumstances around that. So at the time that this came out, I was a 16-year-old boy, and it really spoke to the world that I was living in at the time. So a lot of the lyrics around this, this is one of the great breakup albums of all time. But at the time I heard it, I'd never had a relationship to have broken up. By the time that the record was released in the UK in the summer of 1991, I had my first relationship, and the breakup around that was pretty fucking horrendous. I'll be honest about it. And I've never understood why people would want to break up and do so in a way that's vicious or seems to cause more people hurt than is absolutely necessary. Hurt is utterly unavoidable, and the person in question, my first girlfriend, treated me and a lot of other people appallingly. It was unforgivable, in fact, the way that I was treated. There was somebody else who got involved with them. There seemed to be an awful lot of overlap between those two things that happened, and the somebody else was not subtle, and as a general rule, you shouldn't go out with your mate's girlfriends, especially not when they're actually going out with them in the first place. There are things that should and shouldn't be done. And, if you gave a shit about any other human being on the planet, you probably shouldn't shag your mate's girlfriend, especially when you're 16. Over time, I mean, the lyrics on this album, really, I wouldn't say they saved my life, but they really helped me target and focus my anger at the situation that I'd been placed in. From Head Like a Hole, which was very much around almost like a statement of intent in there. The lyric is very much around money and the power that money has over people to corrupt them, and I'd rather die than give you control. Really, really important lyric about the self-identity and dominion. And then you go through the rest of the album, it's got Terrible Lie in it. It's got Something I Can Never Have, Sin. Those were songs where the lyrics just really, really leapt out at me as being very, very pertinent to what I was experiencing, which was firstly being a 17-year-old boy, absolutely full of emotions and hormones, and secondly, having the end of my first relationship with somebody being very, very publicly unfaithful to me. It was really horrible, and the record made my life an awful lot better, and I was able to work through, I think, a lot of the issues and things that go with it as a result of that. So, and also, as a record, it was a combination of electronics and guitars, which was pretty much completely my perfect world. It's I mean, to say it's the 20th best album on my list of favourite albums, the album was, they say all art is autobiography. They never tell you whose autobiography it is, and that album was really essential to me in surviving a very, very difficult time in my life. Now, the number 19 on the list is this classic, Jane's Addiction, Ritual de la Habitual. And I first came to this band when they made an appearance on The Late Show in 1991. They performed Jane Says. This is I think a 2016 repressing of the vinyl. I also have it on American CD with a slightly different cover. that features the First Amendment on, because if you would look, oh look, willies, boobs, and I'm a very grown-up and mature human being. But the original cover in America was censored with just white text, and so this album really kind of blew my mind around what rock could do. At the time that I heard this, I hadn't heard very much in the way of experimental music. I was very, very attracted to things with shifting tempos, time shifts, wild and unusual tunings, things like that. And I found the idea of four to the floor rock and roll boring. I'd had shitty poodle hair metal shoved down my throat for years, coming from the bedroom next to mine, including such awful bands as Vow Wow and Whitesnake and other acts that are thankfully forgotten in the realms of time. The music that I was listening to, I loved the idea of guitars, that sound that reflected the roar in my head. But I absolutely hated lyrics about cherry pie and licking lips and worship our master's every need and things like that. Sexist, dunderheaded crap by idiots that thought that the only thing that really mattered is that you can party all night and open up and say and I was overjoyed when Nirvana suddenly made bands like Warrant and Whitesnake redundant and extinct pretty much overnight, and it was and this band really led the way in that respect. So this is a record really very definitely of two sides. So the first time I properly heard this, I was around a house party at a friend's of mine's, whose name I've forgotten because it was 30 years ago. He could tell me who he is now. He could be sat next to me at work and I would have no idea. But we put the side 2 of this album on, and I must admit I was passively stoned in the grounds that everyone else was smoking dope and I wasn't, but I was managing to get a contact high off the fumes, so to speak. And I heard 3 days and I thought, this is incredible. Is it the fact that I feel a little bit weird, or is it the fact that the song is great? So I went out and bought the CD pretty much the next day because I really enjoyed that feeling. And I thought, is it the record or was it the dope? And to be honest, it was the record. 3 days is one of the most amazing songs ever. It's like about 20 different songs written into one. And the idea of a song being verse, chorus, bridge, guitar solo, chorus, end, it smashes that to pieces. And it's really kind of very, very experimental. And it tied in with the love that I had for unstructured music and experimental music at the time. I listened to a lot of movie soundtracks. I listened to a lot of somewhat experimental bands that played with the form. So people like Tangerine Dream and stuff like that. And the whole of this album just said, you think you know rock? Think again. Completely blew it apart. Even right from the opening, where you've got Stop and No One's Leaving, Ain't No Right, all of that stuff, and it just blew me away. Just the endless possibilities that you could have through music, and how music could be completely undescribably brilliant. Now 18 on my list is this David Bowie's Black Star. Not possibly one of the most recent releases that there is. This is an incredible record. I listened to it on the Friday that it was released, and I was like, oh my god, he's done it. He's made the most amazing album. I think it's the best David Bowie record. Some of you will disagree with me. Some of you have the right to be wrong. But it was a complete work of art. And one of the things that I've been drawn to, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of the albums which you'll hear are actually a little bit younger than you might expect for a bloke of my years, is I want music to speak to me constantly around what it is to be alive now. What's it like to be a 68-year-old David Bowie in 2015? This is the record that tells you what that is all about. I've got other albums that tell you, what is it like to be a 50-year-old man who's and they're not the kind of records that you necessarily would expect them to be. So I put this on and I thought, oh my god, this is the best. I texted my brother, I think, and I went, oh, this is the best thing he's done since 1976. I couldn't believe how good it was. He ditched the the journeyman band that he'd had of Earl Slick and Pat Leonard and all, and he'd just gone, no, I can be anything I want, and what I want to be is weird. And what I hadn't realised is that he was turning his imminent death into a work of art. So Black Star obviously was released, I think, 4 days before he died, and I listened to it, watched it, saw it, and I thought this is an amazing piece of work. And there is nothing about the record that isn't perfect. It's a matte black gatefold sleeve. We've got the pictures of stars here. This is a heat sensitive sleeve, by the way. Apparently in the summer it reveals a star field on the inside of the star. There is an Elvis Presley song, I think, where he refers to his black star. And black star is also the phrase that people use to describe cancer, which David Bowie had been diagnosed with and was fighting at the time he was recording the record. And again, he just took all of the ideas that people had about what it was to be David Bowie and just threw them all away and went, I'm going to be whoever I want to be. And some of the lyrics in here are really dense and deep and multi-layered. I think that the last song on the last album that he released in his lifetime is I Can't Give Everything Away, and it's just an incredible song, and I kind of really, I think, connected with that work. At the time that it came out, I was in my early 40s, and my life was, I had lots of great people in my life, but what I didn't have necessarily was a full comprehension of everything that was going on. I mean, even the packaging and the artwork, it is a work of art turned into a record. And I think it's not just David Bowie's best album, but it really helped me at a certain point in my life. I was experiencing, when it came out, I was experiencing some pretty tough stuff, and I don't want to moan too much about that, but art and music helped me on a map through my life. Album, I think this is 17. Pop leads itself, the looks or the lifestyle. I had no idea when I was growing up that it wasn't normal to see people that you saw at gigs and people that were friends of friends. It wasn't normal for them to be on TV. As far as I was concerned, this band that I liked had made a really great album, and the looks of the lifestyle is, for me, a very underrated record. The band had taken the concept of sampling and production and creating songs and really just turned it into a very fluid, straightforward album. I think, to me, Pop Will Eat Itself are better than the Beastie Boys. The thing that makes Pop Will Eat Itself not cool in the eyes of some people is that they don't come from Brooklyn, they don't dig kung fu movies, they don't make videos that have giant robots in it. Sonically, the production work and the advances in technology and the songwriting that you've got on things like Looks of the Lifestyle or Cure for Sanity or This Is the Day, This Is the Hour, This Is This, completely as revolutionary and as interesting as the Beastie Boys. And I tie that record with a whole bunch of other experiences around opening up my prejudiced mind into what was possible. I just go, well, if you can imagine it and if you can make it and it can sound good, that's what matters. It doesn't have to be rock or pop or electronic music or metal or whatever. It can be everything all at once with a side order of rap and hip hop. And it can go from something like Get the Girl, Kill the Baddies, which was bizarrely a number 9 hit single, and it can turn into then go into something like Urban Futuristic, which is a kind of like heavy metal riff armor built around Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy. Oh, we've got a cat in the room. I didn't realise we had a cat. We've got a huge black cat who's going to be joining us shortly. You may or may not see her heart. There she goes. That's Mog. Big cat. Herder lands there. Hang on, I'm going to have to let her out of the room. Album 16. Oh, she's let herself out. Is Frank Turner's Love, Hire and Song. This was released in, I think, 2008. This is the 10th anniversary edition from 2018. That has the album itself, and it has a set of demos. This is the clear vinyl version that I think you could get from Beggar's Banquet in Kingston. This album at the time, and I've always been open to new music. So, as far as I was concerned, a good song is a good song, and if you love it, you love it, and that's what really matters. And this has got some incredible songs on it, but it also got some very straight talking, straight ahead folk rock on, and that's not folk rock using it as a dirty word. It's just got great songs on it. It's got I Need Proof Up before he became famous, Reasons Not to Be an Idiot, Photosynthesis, Substitute. That's a great song, and Substitute has the lyric, if music be the food of love, then I guess that I'm a fat romantic slob. And you know that's a brilliant lyric, and it's funny, and it's real, and I was like listening to the first time I saw him was on Reading 2009 on television, and I was watching it, and I thought, this is really good, where's this guy been? As it stood, he'd only been making records for about 3 years. But I was like, right, I'm really interested. I want to know more, and it kind of rekindled, I think, my love for more modern music. The fact that he's younger than me, all right, so I'm an underachiever. That's okay. But I always remember what Brian Eno said, which is you throw your dart at the wall, then you draw the bullseye around where the dart has landed. So, by my standards, not everyone can be this, but I can be the best me that I can be, and that's good enough. But it's just a great record that really spoke to me and made sense of certain things that were happening. Now, number, I think it's 15, Metallica and Justice for All. Okay, let's forget the fact that it's got the worst bass sound in history and the drums sound like tin pot pans. This is a classic metal album. It's the album that I sat and listened to an awful lot on cassette. Both at home and around my friends' houses when we were playing on the Sega Mega Drive and other various cheap game consoles. And we would listen to this and Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of a Seventh Son and Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction and Def Leppard's Hysteria endlessly. The thing with Metallica at this point, and this was before or just when they're on the cusp of releasing singles, before they became a stadium band. So in my mind, the fact that Metallica play stadiums is weird. They're a theatre thrash metal band, maybe arenas, on par with, although slightly more accessible than Slayer or Anthrax or Megadeth. But this was a great record, and I just played it until pretty much the tape broke, and so I had to go and copy it. But what we've got with this is series of layered, multi-structured, somewhat experimental songs, not presented in an order that's really, compromising. It's not made of radio hits, although it's got one on it, and quite how you would think that a 7.5-minute song that's got about 4 different tempos in and no obvious chorus about an amputee who wants to commit suicide would be a hit single. I don't know, but there it is. It's got Harvester of Sorrow on it, which should have been the second track on the album. It's just it's not just what's in this record, it's what this record did, and this record opened my eyes to music. It taught me in the same way that Jane's Addiction's Ritual de la Habitual showed me, is that metal doesn't have to be stupid, it doesn't have to be sexist, it doesn't have to be moronic, it doesn't have to wear spandex, it doesn't have to be made by idiots for idiots that don't know how to string a sentence together, and it doesn't have to be made by people that are as boneheadedly stupid as Chris Holmes in The Decline of Western Civilization Part 2. This was metal that was made for smart people with brains that were able to see beyond the surface and to go, right, so you've got loud guitars, you've got loud drums, those are fantastic, but also you've got dense, complicated song structures. If you transpose these into things like classical pieces, which obviously they later did with the S&M and S&M2 albums, or Apocalyptica, you could go, these are really complex songwriting here that's uncompromising, both lyrically, melodically, and musically. And what I thought is that, if you liked Metallica, you didn't have to wear spandex, you didn't have to wear stupid, string vest t-shirts or buy albums with pictures of naked women on. You could have instead pictures of blindfolded statues of women on, for example, which is, completely different. But this was I played the fuck out of this when I was younger. I listen to the live versions now because I've listened to the studio version so many times, and that's the be all and end all around it. Next one, I think this is number 14. This is the Flaming Lips and Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. And I must admit, this band passed me by completely until about 2003. I'd heard She Don't Use Jelly in the mid-90s. I didn't like their kind of like guitar, fuzzy, almost Sage's Mary Chain earlier stuff. It took me a long time to get into that. I saw the band on television. They played Glastonbury on a Saturday afternoon. It was on, I think, BBC Three in the days that were, and I watched them playing the songs from this album, and I was like, I want more of that. That's really interesting. It's humanist, very widescreen, very very interesting. Got a very unusual approach to melody, experimental songs like, for example, "Are You a Hypnotist?" Or "One More Robot," "In the Morning of the Magicians." And people look about it, Wayne is not the best singer in the world, but he doesn't need to be the best singer in the world. Let Whitney Houston and Beyonce be the best singer in the world. Let Wayne be the best singer that he can be. This is an original 2002 copy. If you look very carefully there, you'll see that there's a slight chink that's been taken out of the groove, which is why it wasn't about £200 when I bought it. It was reduced because it had been damaged. But it's a record that was brave and bold, and it was and you've got "Do You Realise" on, which is one of the best songs that's ever been written. It's got "Fight Test," Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, and again, like the Jane's Addiction album, like the Metallica album, it was a record that was really interested in doing stuff that was served the songs as opposed to served the charts. And it's been the start of a lifelong love affair with the band ever since. And I listened to that album an awful lot. Now, I think we're on number 13 now. U2, Europa. This is my favourite U2 album. No ifs, no buts. It is my favourite U2 album because it is the best one. It is not the most obvious one. It is not the most straightforward one that the band have made. It's not got hit singles written all over it. It's a very, very long way away from where the streets have no name. It's the sound of a band that's able to do and be anything it wants to be, and what it wants to be, it wants to be weird. It wants to do things it's never done before. There are no obvious hit singles on this apart from "Stay," which is U2-ish ballad, I suppose. It's got my favourite U2 song on, which is "Lemon." Lyrically, it's really, really interesting, and it's got some very unusual approaches to reality and how reality is constructed. It's got some classic kind of Brian Eno backing vocals, structuring, layering. It opens, it closes. It's got the the flow of an album in it. Oh God, it's late, isn't it? I'm sorry. I should be more awake, but frankly, I'm trying not to drink so much caffeine late at night. Otherwise, I'd be in bed at 2 o'clock and we'll go, oh my God, I'm thinking about things like, yeah, like is a gingerbread man a cannibal when he eats other gingerbread men? What happens to a gingerbread man in a house? Is he a man made of house, or is he a house made of man? That's the kind of stuff I don't want to be thinking about when I'm trying to get to sleep. So I'm laying off the caffeine, and it's having its effect upon me. This is I think the first post-sexual U2 album. So pretty much all the albums that they've made up to that point had a song in about how a woman had hurt them, or how they'd hurt a woman, or how they couldn't reconcile the relationship that they've got with whoever it is who is the main point of a person. And one of the really interesting things about U2 is that although they write a lot of love songs, a lot of those love songs aren't love songs to people. You can replace the idea of love in those songs with the concept of addressing God or a deity or a higher power. And when you do that, their songs in their albums become far more complex, because you're then talking about, well, a belief structure, and you're talking about, well, what happens if you do or don't believe in something or someone. Oh God, I was going to go and pause that, but it didn't work. Now, Europa is some people think it's garbage. Some people are wrong. It's weird. It's experimental. It's strange and unusual things with sound. It's some could say they've forgotten how to write a song. It's not true. They've just forgotten how to write the songs that you like, that fill stadiums. And it's the sound of a band just going, we can do anything. We can go anywhere. We can be anything we like. And that's what we're going to do. Right. Next up, Underworld, Dub No Bass with My Head Man. Incredibly important record to me. This one, I think this is number 12 on the list. Now, I spent most of the summer of 1994 and 1996 and 1995 playing this album and playing on my PlayStation and playing things like Grand Theft Auto when it was first released, or perhaps some of the other games. It was soundtracked by Underworld, and I loved electronic music. I'd loved electronic music since I was a kid. I'd always been attracted to bleepy bloopy type things, and this was, the sound of electronic music that wasn't made just to soundtrack getting off your tits at 3 a.m. in the steering wheel in Birmingham. This was music that was made for that, but also to sound amazing when you listen to it on a Walkman at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon walking through a city. It's to me it sounds like the sound of an urban city, sounds of pubs and clubs and industry and factories, and it's got all of that in there as well, and all that technology. So, like for example, even on a song like "Dark and Long," has got like a percussion realm that goes in it, dun, 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 and it sounds exactly like people tapping on metal pipes in factories. When I worked in a factory for a while, it sounded like that. It gave a structure and a cadence to the world and how I saw it. Also, it's got cowgirl on it, which is amazing. And my favourite part of pretty much any Underworld gig is the bit where everything drops out, it all goes black, and then suddenly it kicks in again, and the lasers kick off, and everyone loses their shit. It's a great record, and it really captures the spirit of my younger self in there, and it allows me to stay in touch with who I used to be. And that's the thing, all these records, they're not just records, are they? They're almost like transmissions from a previous timeline that I somehow survived. Now I think we're on number 11 now, so I'm going to stop in a minute after we get to number 11. Number 11, perhaps somewhat surprisingly, first one I don't have on vinyl, is Moby's Animal Rights album. Now that is not a record that I think any of you were expecting me to hear. A lot of people will think Moby is that bland guy that does that kind of like blues pop electro stuff with samples of blues albums. This is completely different to that. Now it's important to say that I can't really think about Animal Rights without thinking about this edition of Animal Rights, which comes from America and has a different track listing, and this album, which is called Voodoo Child, The End of Everything. Moby recorded 3 albums at the same time in his bedroom studio, one of which was Animal Rights, one of which was Voodoo Child, The End of Everything, and one of which was the second disc on Animal Rights, which was called The Little Idiot, which is a completely beatless ambient album of textures and sounds. So Animal Rights is Moby calling back to his original and first musical love, which was Washington post-punk in the 80s. Now the American version of Animal Rights has some of the songs from Little Idiot wrapped around inside it, so it's got a completely different texture, a completely different flow. The version which I always cling to is this one, which is the UK edition, on which Moby plays every single instrument apart from 2 songs which have some viola on. Now this is one of the greatest breakup albums of all time. Now there's a lot of competition for that. Pretty Hate Machine's already appeared. There's going to be another one of the greatest breakup albums of all time that's going to appear in the top 10. But this is one of the greatest breakup albums ever. In which Moby plays every single instrument. It's got a very claustrophobic, very insular sound. And if you're thinking about something that it sounds like, think about the first Foo Fighters album where Dave Grohl played absolutely every instrument. Now that record has a kind of sense of claustrophobia and power and a single-minded intent, because the same guy is playing all the instruments all the way through. There's no gap, there's no difference. It's made by the same guy. The band is completely in sync because the band is one guy. And that's one of the other things about Pretty Hate Machine that's really interesting. Is one guy making all of that sound, and somehow this very singular, determined vision. Animal Rights is the sound of like buzzsaw guitars, and it's the sound of a man clearly in pain, working through the hurt and rejection of the end of his relationship. This is a record that I listened to a lot in the year 2000 when I became unexpectedly and immediately single at very short notice in an emergency situation I wasn't anticipating. And I was left to try and kind of work out what the hell had just happened to me, whilst I also was living in the flat that we'd rented together, but I was on my own. It was a really tough year, the year 2000. This record made it a heck of a lot easier that year. It's got some incredible songs on it that you will probably have never heard. It's got, for example, Someone to Love, heavy flow. It's got My Love Will Never Die, Say It's All Mine, Face It, Living. These are big, heavy, sharp songs with teeth and claws, and the whole thing sounds like it's almost as if it's a statement from them that said, if what it feels to feel is this, I don't want to feel. It was almost like a man kind of raging to try and find an inner peace, and screaming at the injustices of whatever it is that has happened around it in a way that's almost incoherent. The sound is what matters on this, not the vocals at all. And it's an incredible record that hardly anybody knows. I had a conversation with him in 2011 where I said that I told him that it was one of my favourite albums, and he said very few people say that, and he was quite right. It's such a great record. I mean, if you want a breakup album that you need in your life and you haven't heard enough breakup albums yet, this is one of the ones to get, probably on Spotify, not quite sure. Try and go for the 12-track version, which was released in the UK on Mute. It has a couple of extra songs on it which aren't available anywhere else, and it's a longer, bigger, better thing, I think. This version from America has 15 songs on it, and it kind of dilutes the intensity of the album a little bit by throwing in some of the ambient songs from Little Idiot to give it a little bit of pacing. Also, this version doesn't have My Love Will Never Die in it, the American version, and My Love Will Never Die is phenomenal. I wish I'd gone to see him on this tour, but he was supporting Soundgarden, and I didn't. Now, the other album I will mention is this one here, which is Voodoo Child, The End of Everything, which was recorded at the same time and the same sessions as the Animal Rights and Little Idiot albums. This is a fabulous and underloved kind of ambient album, very gentle, very relaxing, very reminiscent of the kind of instrumental soundscapes that you would get in bands like Tangerine Dream. Long, drawn-out songs built on a minimal number of riffs. If I wanted to show how, I mean, for me, every time I listen to this, I feel exhausted because it was the soundtrack to exhausted commuting at various points in my life where I just needed something to comfort me as I travelled on a train to and from London, which I did for something like 4,000 times in the course of my life. Now, that takes us up to album number 11. There are 10 more to go, and I'm going to take a break now. I'm going to upload this, and I think I'm probably going to do the other ones some other time, hopefully when I'm a bit more awake. So, thank you for your time. Just in case any of you hadn't worked out yet, the 20 albums that we've got. Number 20 spot, Pretty Hate Machine. Number 19, Ritual de la Habitual by the fabulous Wanos Addiction. 18 is Black Star by Sir David of Bowie. 17 is Pop Believes Itself, The Looks or the Lifestyle. Could have been any Pop Believes Itself album, but I chose that one because I saw them a lot on that tour and those shows were fantastic. Next one, 16, Frank Turner, Love, Ire and Song. Not for everyone, but sometimes you just need to wear your heart on your sleeve and have a heart. 15 is Metallica and Justice for All. 14 is The Flaming Lips and Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. 13, U2's Europa. 12 is Dub No Bass with My Head Man by Underworld, and 11 is Animal Rights by Moby. There are 10 more to come, and if you're thinking, hey mate, you haven't mentioned Band X or Band Y, they're probably coming. Hold on and find out. What I will say is that you might be quite surprised by some of the choices in here. There are a couple of bands that that I love, and I know that I love, but didn't make the top 20 because there's only so many bands in the world and there's only so many spots in the top 20. Believe me, I could have done a top 50, I could have done a top 100, but I'm not sure if any of you are interested in that. So I'm doing a top 20. We've gone down 20 to 11. Next time we'll go 10 to my number one, which, by the way, is not the soundtrack to Dougal and the Blue Cat. And I'm sure that will upset some of you. So thank you very much and see you again soon. Usual stuff, questions, comments, put it in the comments box. Ask me on Twitter. I'll try and respond to you all. Although, to be honest, hardly any of you comment and hardly any of you tweet me. So it's dead easy to make sure you always get a response. And see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.